you understand we can be very, very good. And literally the next practice, we lost a player to injury. First game, Dejounte breaks his hand, and it just became a cascade effect. And so now we sit here in unprecedented times in terms of the amount of player salary we've lost due to injury. And at the same time, that doesn't absolve anyone of the mistakes we've made and of the issues that we have to address moving forward. You know, we've talked as a front office quite a bit about the fact that no harm really befalls you as a franchise unless you fail to get better and fail to react to the things that lay bare all of your shortcomings. And I think you've seen all of those shortcomings, and we need to address them systematically and improve. One thing I do want to point out, one of those shortcomings is not our medical staff. That same medical staff doing the exact same things last year had one soft tissue injury that was avoidable until the very end of the season when Zion got injured. This group works incredibly hard every day. These things that happened in most cases were completely flukish and unavoidable. I think Dejounte's Achilles certainly is one. The broken hand was another. Herb Jones' shoulder subluxation's another. It really was a sum of all fears in that area. But that's not a group that we look at as being responsible, if that's the right word. We look at them as being a part of the whole, and they certainly need to work to improve, to get better, and they do every day. And they are here literally every single day. They never have an off day. And I think you've seen that that group has the same strength of character that our coaching staff and our players have. Our coaching staff, I know you're going to want to address some of that as well. Our coaching staff has had to endure 29 different starting lineups, I believe, which I think is the fifth most in the league. But they've had a situation where every practice day and every game day, you would get one body back and lose two. It's really, really hard to build habits and to learn how to play with each other when the group that's playing with each other changes every single day. So I think under the circumstances, they've dealt with the adversity quite well. All of that leads me to where we are now, which is one of the things we realized. We needed more veteran presence. We needed more basketball IQ. We needed more floor spacing around Zion. And what we really needed was championship caliber human beings and championship caliber winners. And in Bruce Brown, we get a true champion. We get somebody who's been a critical part of being a glue guy on a championship team. In Kelly Olynyk, we get somebody who's a floor spacing big with incredibly high basketball IQ, as Bruce has as well. I think that's going to make everyone's job a little easier because you're going to put guys in roles that they are more capable of playing, and their basketball IQ will help everybody play off one another a little bit more. We're really excited about both of these players from the standpoint of what they offer us moving forward. This is not viewed as a short-term situation with either player in our minds, and we hope as the season unfolds, they grow to feel the same about us. What we lost in Brandon Ingram is one of the best players in franchise history. More importantly to me and to our staff, one of the best human beings I've ever met in the NBA. Somebody is a really, really beautiful spirit and a really beautiful human being. He and his family committed themselves wholly to this community in a way that very few players ever have, and we're incredibly grateful for that. And I think you're going to see these players that are joining us be very, very similar in their commitment to this fan base and this community. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
What were some of the goals you guys had in mind as far as compensation in the DI trade? And ultimately, do you feel like the timing was better now versus doing it last summer when you guys were doing it?
Well, you make the deals when they present themselves. There wasn't a deal last summer that made sense, and we couldn't have acted on one that made sense at that time. I think where we ended up was we wanted to address our front court. Obviously, being in a situation where we're struggling to rebound at the level we are, you couldn't move a wing without getting a big. And Kelly is one that fits with Zion particularly very well. Again, the basketball IQ piece was really important. We wanted to address basketball IQ. We wanted to address locker room, championship background. The human element needed to fit us. It's always been central to what we do. And I think that's why the Toronto opportunity stood out like it did. At the same time, we're a team that I think it's safe to say the biggest names in the league aren't saying, oh, that's where I'm going. That's where I want to play. You've seen an unbelievable trade deadline this year, just a flurry of activity of everybody wanting to land in a certain spot, and this is the only team I'll play for, and all of those types of things. That's not how we've been built, and it's not how we're going to be built. We're going to be a team that's built around it's different here, and you need to want to be part of what we do here. And I think Bryson Graham and his team have done such a remarkable job in a drafting situation from a draft standpoint that we're now in a situation where maybe the pick is very good, and that's something we can lean on. And from a trade deadline perspective, adding high variance picks was critical for us because Bryson and his team have proven themselves to be so good at using them. So that was a big part of it as well.
Could you just maybe address this line of thinking that's out there? And I don't know if it's prevailing, but it's definitely out there. 6 years after Zion was supposed to be a transformational pick, are there diminishing returns to continuing down the path of having him as a centerpiece?
I think there were certainly diminishing returns to having two best players make the amount of money they do when they only played 34% of their games together. I think that was challenging, and that wasn't all on Zion. I think Zion has dealt with a great number of challenges, some of which were his own and sort of his own doing, quite frankly, and he would tell you that. And some of those were totally outside of him. And I think as it pertains to diminishing returns, I think if you take just his body of work this year, what he's done for us when he's been healthy, he's taking steps every day, and he's grown by leaps and bounds, both on the court and off. I think the player he is now is better than he's ever been. He's playing at a historic level in terms of efficiency per minute. Most importantly, what you're seeing is he's playing defense at a level that he never has before. And one of the reasons he's on the minutes restrictions that he's been on is that Daniel Bove, our director of sports science and really the head of that performance team, he sits there courtside with an iPad loaded to Zion's load management literally every minute that Zion's on the floor. And he can tell when Zion's load is spiking. He can tell when he needs to be shut down. And we've got the ability to really monitor his progress. And he's showing incredible progress daily in terms of how high his floor is rising. I think what you saw last year when he got injured, he's walking the Lakers down in that game, and he's playing at a level that very few humans have ever played at. But it was such a spike in what was required of his body that it opened him up to injury. And I think where Zion has really committed to this is his chronic workload is radically higher than it's ever been, and that's enabling us to get more from him on both sides of the ball. He's also, from a leadership perspective, doing things he's never done before, and he's much more vocal than he's ever been, and he's embracing the opportunity he has to seize this team, and I think you're going to see that. So, no, I don't think we're getting diminishing returns. I think it's quite the opposite. I think we're seeing the best of him right now, and there's more to come in that way. Sorry.
With B.I. gone and Dejounte hurt, what's your feel as far as just the responsibility on Zion's shoulders now and you know, how much he has to face without those guys next time?
Well, to some degree, this is be careful what you wish for. You know, he loves Point Zion. Well, we're going to need a whole lot of that right now. I think you saw last night our lack of play creation was very difficult from a offensive generation standpoint, and we were playing exactly the wrong team to do that against. But I think it's going to be a challenge for our coaching staff to piece together what that looks like. And I do think it puts a big burden on Z. At the same time, Bruce is somebody who's shown the ability to play 1 through 5 on both sides of the ball. I think you'll see him get to operate a little bit from a playmaking standpoint as well. So that should share some of the burden too.
I know it's tough when you lose a player like D.I., but how much has the emergence of Trey Murphy kind of make that an easier decision?
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Rod. There's actually several players along the lines of Trey that have shown incredible growth, but I think what makes Trey's sort of explosion as a player so significant to us is it happened at a time where we really needed to know what he was capable of. And the injuries may have provided the opportunity to show us that. Had we been healthy, I don't think you would have seen him with the level of usage he's had, by way of example. And I don't think we would know that he could get to the line at the rate that he is. And honestly, I don't think he knows. Trey Murphy is a young player who's never been focal in the way he is right now. I don't think I've ever been with a young player who works harder on his own outside of the gym, outside of our team setting than he does. And he's getting to reap a lot of the benefits of that. This offseason, he spent a great deal of time working on the things you're seeing him do. And at the same time, had we been healthy, he might not have gotten the opportunity to do it. So if there's a silver lining to a season like this, it's that players like Trey, players like Yves, Missi, are getting to show what they're capable of. I'm really excited, our whole staff is, about what Yves can do when he shows the level of aggression he had last night. We want to see more of that moving forward. As Hawk continues to get healthier and stronger, we're excited about what Hawk is going to be able to do. I think you've seen B.J. Boston get an opportunity to prove he's clearly an NBA rotational player. And one of the things with Brandon Boston, when we brought him in, we claimed him and really intended him to be sort of the focal point offensive player on the G League team to a huge degree, and thought he would be with us periodically. What he's shown is he might be the best on-ball defender on our team, and that's remarkable to get the opportunity to do that. So all these injuries have created a lot of positives for us in terms of what we've learned and what we're going to be able to do building upon our roster, none more so than Trey. This is a special player whose ceiling is almost boundless at this point.
About the injuries, obviously, and it sounds like you have a glass half full approach with it, but I believe it's like 196 games missed by 8 of the top 9 scorers. As an executive, how does that impact your evaluation, and how much more difficult does it make you kind of evaluate how things are and how guys mess with each other?
Glass half full, because you have to be to some degree. The numbers you just gave, they all spell 12 and 41. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Nobody cares the reasons. Nobody really cares how difficult your challenges are. It's what are you achieving and what are you producing? And I think those injuries have created a lot of challenges that I think we've risen to in some cases and not met in others, quite frankly. And I think we need to get better in terms of how this team is structured so that we can withstand those things. But also, I think we need to get better just in terms of our ability to build a more available roster. And obviously, that's something we've failed at to this point.
Follow up on Zion's load management. How much are the restrictions on back-to-backs and minutes tied to the time he missed and that he's not in mid-season shape? Or is there an element in there that's going to be chronic going forward, where he's always going to have that kind of restriction to some degree?
I don't believe he'll always have those types of restrictions. I do think that a great deal of it's tied to his past injury history and the nature of his specific injury. Hamstrings are the most prevalent in terms of recurrence of injury. It's one of the most dangerous injuries to have, particularly when you're anatomically built the way Z is. He's predisposed to that anyway. So I think what we've done is spent a great deal of time working to raise that chronic level to make him more capable of withstanding more. And I think as he continues to grow and evolve this season, you'll see those things change a little bit. I don't think it's a fixed number necessarily as much as a fixed level that he needs to be able to produce to, and that his fatigue can't spike in the way that it has in the past. And I think he's growing every day in his ability to play through those spikes. So we're excited about where he's heading. And again, this is the best defensive version of Zion we've ever gotten. So while he's playing fewer minutes, he's producing far more in totality on both sides of the ball, and that's exciting for us.
David, with the team being 12 and 41, naturally there's going to be a lot of scrutiny, a lot of criticism. You've already spoken to a lot of it already, but can you talk a little bit in depth about the job Willie Green's done this season? Like, how would you critique him? Because he's been in the crosshairs a lot this season.
Yeah, I think when you're 12 and 41, everyone deserves scrutiny to some degree. We're all failing to achieve what we wanted to do. again, there's reasons, and we can have thoughts around what that is. And gosh, if we weren't injured, we'd be 41-12. But that's also disingenuous. There are a lot of things we could do better. I think Willie would tell you there's things they could grow in and do better. And I think they're addressing a lot of those things. But I also think they've done a remarkable job of keeping the spirit around our team where it is. You know, I think the most overword used in sports is culture. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about our ability to overcome adversity and to believe in one another. And I think Willie and his staff have done a really good job of getting our players to continue to do that. And I don't see any reason that'll change.
Big picture wise, 6 years, 2 winning seasons, 2 playoff appearances, from where you were in 2019 when you drafted Zion to where you are now. If I'm a fan looking at it from the outside, I say, where have we gotten? How do you address those fans who are disappointed, who are angered in some ways about the progress of the franchise, who've seen other teams in the West get to the top? Where would you say the state of the franchise is today, and what's the plan now?
I think everyone who ends up in our position wants to leave it better than they found it. I'm very confident that we're building towards something very powerful and very special here. There are a lot of narratives around this franchise that have completely changed. Mrs. Benson, when she hired us, gave us the bandwidth to do this at the right level in terms of the people we've brought in. CJ McCollum being the president of the Players Association and wanting to stay here and being committed to the franchise is certainly something that's been positive for us. But I think the narratives around this team are all different nationally and league-wide. I think the view of this franchise is different than it was when we got here. At the same time, we're not viewed as a perennial winner, and that's what we want to be viewed as. So through that lens, we failed miserably, and that's not something that I take lightly. We're judging ourselves on wins and losses at the end of the day, and we're judging ourselves on winning meaningful games. I won a championship in Cleveland, a market that hadn't won one in 52 years. That's a powerful thing to deliver to a community, and that's what we're doing here. And Mrs. Benson gave us the opportunity to do this at a level that matters. And so if we deliver on that, we will have succeeded, and if we don't, we will have failed. So I don't know how to be more open than that. We're failing to achieve what we meant to do. At the same time, that doesn't negate the fact that we've had huge successes along the way, and we are definitely building this into a better place than we inherited from a team perspective, and that matters to us.
You mentioned, some of the injuries you guys have suffered, broken hand or a guy falling on hurt shoulders, you can't avoid it. Do you feel like up to this point there's been enough work done to avoid the avoidables, I guess you could say, the stuff that you guys can prevent from happening? Do you feel like the staff has done enough in that area?
Yeah, I do, and I use last year as the example. There are really good templates that exist in our league for having what has sort of become known as a gap year. Memphis last year had unprecedented injury situation, and they came out of that into this year much stronger for it. And they're one of the better teams in our league, and they're one of the younger teams in our league. If we can address those issues and move forward positively, we would similarly be very young and very productive. And I think when you look at last season with our medical staff, again, until Zion's injury at the very end of the season, they had unprecedented success in terms of what this organization had ever achieved before that. And it's the same people. So I don't look at that as something where this is on them. And at the same time, I know every single one of them would tell you they want to do better and they want to put this in a better situation. So that's not to say that everything there is perfect either. But they're not the singular item to blame by any means. And I think we're really pleased with how they've dealt with the adversity.
Based on where Herb is just in this process?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Where he is in the field.
So Herb actually is going to, well, he already has sought an additional opinion. I think he's probably going to be shut down for the season here soon, and we'll have more information as it goes along once he's evaluated there.
You mentioned observing the players on this road trip. Was there a particular reason why you wanted to be on this road trip at this time?
Well, I'm on most of them, much to their chagrin. I'm around a lot. But seeing them in this particular situation really helped me understand what it was going to look like while there was a great deal of adversity and a lot of questions surrounding the team. And I think they just leaned on one another. And that's important when you've got a group that does that. When you have a group that in adversity fractures and is worried about themselves, that's a bad sign. I think there's some very good teams in our league you've seen do that, by the way. When it becomes about me and not the team, I think you've got problems, and I don't think our team has done that. I haven't seen them fracture in that way and make it a me-oriented pursuit, and that's really meaningful to us.
A lot last summer about what Dejounte could bring on and off the court for the team. Losing him, how much did that change your outlook going into this trade deadline, and how much do you think it will change your outlook going into the offseason?
Well, it changed it from an on-court perspective a great deal. The one thing about Dejounte that we talked about at that press conference, and fans never see this, Zion is the person he is right now and is making the strides he is in large part because of Dejounte's leadership. His voice is going to be heard whether he's on the court or not. And that's the part of him we're going to need to lean on between now and the end of the year as much as we possibly can. He provides a great deal of leadership in that locker room. He provides a great deal of support to young players, and I think that was important to us. I think heading into the deadline, probably that wasn't as big a key for us, but as we're growing this over time, it's something we're really cognizant of, and I think it gives us great hope that we can bring people into the organization and he can help show them what it's meant to be. And honestly, Bruce and Kelly are similar people. I mean, these are really high caliber winners. These are career winners, and that's important to us.
It feels like that the times while Brandon and Zion were together, that you're almost building two teams. One that worked really well in the absence of one, and one that worked well in the absence of the other. Now that Brandon is removed from the equation, is there a refocus in how you're going to build this team around Zion for the long term, or Zion and Trey, if that's the new pairing? Has there been some clarity in what you want this team to look like 2-3 years down the road?
Well, we had clarity before. We wanted it to be about both Brandon and Z. And what ended up happening was happenstance, provided that we were going to be about one or the other all the time. And thankfully, they were both so talented that when one was healthy and the other wasn't, we were still pretty positive in terms of outcome. That was not by design. Our design was for them to play together and to play well together, and we anticipated that would happen. As Zion continues to seize the opportunity he has now to be more focal in what we're doing, I think a lot will reveal itself. What does he need with him when he's this version of Zion Williamson? Because this is the best version he's ever been in terms of his ability to play both sides of the ball. And we'll learn a lot about what he needs with him. And our fans will certainly get to see it. And I'm excited to see the growth he's made. He's really earned the opportunity to seize the moment, and I think he will.
Do you view that suspension for Zion, the one game for being late, as not a rock bottom per se, but as a turning point that him realizing his responsibility to this team? Did you have to have a conversation with him one-on-one about what leadership means to him?
Yeah, no, we've had several conversations. And that wasn't, honestly, no, that wasn't a rock bottom moment. It was a this is what we do here moment. For us internally, it wasn't that big a deal. It was what the rules called for, and it's what came next. And we give everybody a player handbook at the beginning of the year, and this is what it's going to look like. When you get to this point, this is what happens. And Zion's no different than anybody else in that circumstance. So, no, that wasn't a rock bottom moment. But it was certainly, I think, something for him where he understood we're going to honor what we say we're going to do. And I think that's important from a trust-building standpoint.
Do you credit, I guess, then Dejounte Murray for the maturation that we've seen out of Zion this year, and the reason we're getting two ways on is the biggest reason due is because of Dejounte's ear, basically in his ear?
Yeah, he's certainly a huge part of it. I mean, everybody wants to credit one thing. It's a culmination of a lot of things, but Dejounte's been a very big positive for Z, and I think he would tell you that. I think he's done a lot of things off the court that have been very positive for him as well. I think the change for him in terms of agencies has been something that's been different for him, and he's really leaned into taking what he's being offered. And I think just his growth as a man, as a human being, is really more responsible for it than anybody else. We've talked about people mature at different rates in the league. And sometimes that maturity looks like a brush fire, and sometimes it looks like a forest fire. And I think he's reaching forest fire status now, and that's exciting.
You mentioned a season like this requires, a lot of internal, evaluation, kind of figure out big changes moving forward outside of obviously, getting healthier. What are the big changes you feel like are required for you guys to move forward in a positive way, versus where you are right now?
Well, I think in general terms, you've seen our team. Again, a lot of these are based on analytics, but we're one of the worst rebounding teams in the last 15 years in the NBA. It doesn't take a great deal for me to tell you we need to get bigger and more physical. I think that's fairly obvious. That's something that we're going to need to focus on. I think, again, our ability to make shots around ball-dominant play creators is important. We feel very good about who those shooters are and what those roles look like. But at the same time, you have to deliver on the totality of all of it. And when you're 12-41, for me to sit up here and tell you I know exactly what the thing is would be totally disingenuous. We have a lot of work to do.
There was a stretch where the team went 7-3. And that largely coincided with Trey, Zion, Dejounte being out there on the court together. Did you see?
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah. Did you see a glimpse of what you want to see out of this team? Because we saw increased pace, right? More threes. Did you see that style that you want to see from this team?
Yeah, we did. At the same time, I would tell you that was probably a soft spot in the schedule in terms of the level of competition as well, which was good for us because that lineup had barely played together. So to get their feet underneath them a little bit at that time was important. I don't believe Dejounte, Brandon, and Z played together at all as a group. So never seeing what that looks like is disappointing. That was really one of the toughest things about making the trade was that one practice was just a thing of beauty. We were really excited about what that could look like. And then again, during that 7-3 stretch, I think you saw three guys getting to play together for the first time and learning to do it.
To go from being an elite defensive team the last couple of years to being arguably statistically the worst defensive team in franchise history, is it simply continuity or is it size? Is it, you talk about the multiple factors on the defensive end. What have those factors been from your perspective?
I wouldn't say we were elite to begin with. I think we were very good. I think in that playoff series against Oklahoma City, we were not elite defensively. To be elite defensively, you have to be elite against elite teams. And I think that's something we've never really reached, and that has a lot to do with personnel, quite frankly. I think in terms of what has happened to us since, I think it's like all of these things. It's a sum of many things. It's lack of availability. It's new lineups. It's to some degree scheme, and does it fit the lineups and those types of things. I mean, there's all kinds of factors that enter into it, and I think it's obvious to us that that's one area of improvement. But again, I spoke to the need to be bigger and more physical. This league has gotten bigger and more physical every step of the way. And when the officiating changed the way it did last year, sort of mid-season without any announcement, the teams that were the biggest and the most physical and were fouling the most often stood to gain the most. And we had a team that was much more built around skill and much less around physicality. And that has definitely hurt us to this point.
Is that something, I'm sorry, but is that something you look back at last offseason where before this you talk about we figured out with our size and our center position? Well, you got Yves and he's doing very well, but do you look back at the offseason and say maybe we should have been more aggressive in the pursuit of some size?
Yeah, I think so. But at the same time, those opportunities didn't present themselves. There was nothing that we turned away from, and we did try to achieve that. I talked about the Brandon situation. There were many conversations had there. There just wasn't an opportunity to capitalize on it. At the same time, I would tell you, Oklahoma City is one of the best rebounding teams in history, and in the beginning of the year, they didn't have any healthy bigs. So it's not just that either. It's not always the size of the fight in the dog. Sometimes it's it's not always the size of the dog in the fight. It's the fight in the dog. And I think to some degree, that's how we're ultimately going to overcome everything. And when you're healthy and you have a group that believes in each other, I think historically that's what this franchise has done. I think the reason we've been successful to the level we were at all was that they fought for each other, and I think you'll continue to see that. But yeah, absolutely, we could get bigger and stronger from a personnel standpoint, there's no doubt.
How much is last year, the fact that you guys almost won 50 games, you were right there with beating the Lakers early in the play, and then who would have known if Zion's healthy in the playoffs? How much is that whole situation, combined with, the growth of some of the young guys, how much is the combination of that a security blanket for you and this organization going on to next year, just to think, okay, if we just get healthy and tweak a couple things, we could be right back where we were, if not a little bit ahead?
Well, every year for 3 years, we won more. and 49 games was the second most in franchise history, and we didn't win a single game that year when we trailed entering the fourth quarter, and we didn't win in the clutch. So we probably left a lot of the meat on the bone when we won 49 games. Lord knows we've done that this year. That's not a security blanket. It's a fact. We were better 3 years in a row. So what we were doing, our plan was working. Our plan did not involve unprecedented, epic losses in terms of injuries. But at the same time, our plan also didn't involve being this small. You know, sometimes you don't land the plane on the things that you think you're going to. And so that certainly came into play as well.
As you get deeper into this season, have you and Willie started talking about how you start to emphasize player development a little bit more while still remaining competitive night in and night out?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly right around deadline, you start to have a lot of those conversations of what we're going to look like. You know, we have 2 more games before All-Star break, and then coming out of that, what do we want to look like? Unfortunately for us, the injuries have brought about player development in a way that we never would have wanted them to. So to some degree, we just need to keep doing what we're doing. We need everybody to continue to grow in the way that they are. Obviously, Trey Murphy's development is something that's exciting for us. I spoke to Yves earlier. This is a kid that was a 21st pick in the draft. And our team thought they were going to be really good after that one practice, and Yves was on the 3rd team that night. So this is a group with a lot of talent that hasn't gotten to play together. And I think one of the things that excites us the most coming down the stretch is that we get to lean into some of that growth that's already taken place. I think getting to see how Bruce and Kelly fit will be really important for us. I think you're going to see them pay huge dividends for us in terms of everybody assimilating into a role they can play. Hawk, I think, will be the best version of himself coming down the stretch. I think you'll see a lot of BJ. We will eventually convert him to a standard contract, and he'll be able to play a little bit more without limitations. So I think you'll see a great deal of him. I'm really excited about what we've seen from Antonio Reeves. He's a player. I think he was the 7th Pelican in history to score 30 in an NBA game. Antonio has a great deal of talent, and he's a 2-way player. We look forward to seeing what that looks like. And Karlo Matković has shown some flashes as well of a player who's a very skilled big man. So as we're going through what we are, the turmoil will reveal some very positive things, and we think it's already done that.
As a GM, what were your initial thoughts about the Luka trade and just overall Western Conference? What are your thoughts about where the conference is now?
Honestly, Rod, I mean, I think the league has changed so quickly, and the Western Conference is so clearly stronger than the East at this point, that it's made it so even the league as a whole is talking about what they do to rectify that situation. I think you'll see a great deal of conversation around how you balance things out. Our conference has never been better. Jimmy Butler came to the West. You know, we're not losing core and franchise players that are going east. They're all coming west, and so that was daunting, certainly. And in terms of the Luka trade, I really can't speak to it because I don't have any of the knowledge that Dallas had. I think both teams probably got what they wanted out of it. From a league perspective, the ratings for the Lakers will be mind-numbing the rest of the season. So I guess I'm happy about that.
All right,
Thank you, everybody.